Hope everybody's had a beginning of a great new year. Can't believe it's 2026 already, a few days into it. So I'm sure grateful for the cloud cover and rain that we're having in our community and state of Arizona. And I guess we're assembled to tackle some difficult issues maybe this coming year. I hope they're not difficult, but it's what we do as council. So with that, all members of our council are present. Item 1 is to review the agenda we have for Monday, January 12th council meeting. And let's go through that agenda. Council, are there any questions regarding any of the agenda items? And not everybody speak at once.
Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Duff.
I would like to discuss 8A on the BESS system. That hasn't gone away over the holiday. It's still here.
It hasn't. Mr. Butler, Mary? Okay. I know there's been some changes on that.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. I'm not sure if there's a specific question, but since the meeting in December, we've been working with the applicant related to the NextEra site, which is the one off of Ellsworth. And right now, we're still introducing and recommending the 1,000-foot separation for the residential uses for the BESS systems. The applicant has been working with a property that is zoned residential that would have precluded them from meeting that 1,000-foot setback to look at a rezoning for that site. So we've actually been, we've received a pre-submittal for a rezoning of that site to an industrial use so they can meet that 1,000-foot setback. So the two, where we have the two pre-submittals, the one up on Signal Butte, the one down off of Ellsworth, both would be able to meet that requirement.
So Mayor, Council Member, so the good news is both the IPA site that we previously have worked on and this particular site, NextEra, will be able to move forward with their BESS systems under our proposed ordinance. Now, I think we've heard loud and clear, though, that Council has an interest in continuing to examine that distance requirement as technology and safety advances around the BESS industry continue. We're going to be, working with the utility providers and others to try to understand the needs moving forward. But for this situation right now, this will allow those facilities to move forward and meet the energy demands that Salt River Project needed for that site, for the sites, excuse me.
Part of my concern is a rezone, that is costly and time consuming. It'll take quite a few months before it comes back to council. They are under construction at this time, so is construction stopped?
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, the one that's under construction actually was approved prior to the interpretation that then did not allow the BESS in the city. So the one that's currently under construction on Signal Butte is moving forward. We've gone through that process. They've got everything in place to be able to move forward. They have a second site that is a little bit further inland off of Signal Butte that is the second site that they're looking at. So that one on Signal Butte will move forward, no issues. We've got the other one, IPA has proposed off of Signal Butte, and then this one from NextEra off of Ellsworth.
So NextEra is the only one that is caught in this quandary of the 1,000-foot and requiring them to purchase the multifamily land and go through a rezone process.
That's correct. The second IPA site meets the requirement of the 1,000-foot separation. That's correct.
What would it take to put 400 feet back on for our consideration so that 1,000 feet, there's a lot of energy or some kind of land use in that 1,000 feet. There's costs. This is costing us energy, is costing us economic development.
Mayor and Council Member, that would certainly be a legislative act of the council to to revisit that. The direction we received from the majority of the council was to move forward with the 1,000-foot, and so that's why the ordinance reflects that. That could be something that now or in the future that council could adjust if the thinking around this technology changes or different safeguards in place, which is what we were, staff heard from the majority of council that wanted to keep this at the 1,000-foot.
You know, I spent a lot of time reading, attending webinars, doing some office hours. I spoke to 5 experts on energy storage, and this 1,000 feet does not have any merit or support or evidence that is necessary. I can go into a lot of the detail on why the 100-foot has met, you know, the toxins in the air for public. I can go all into that. I have documents and I can talk about it. I just think 1,000 feet is overkill and it's kind of out of the air. It's not accomplishing anything. And you think in that 1,000 feet, 3 football fields, if we could fill that with energy storage or housing or whatever, it would have an economic return to our community. Land just sitting there with no purpose at all other than some arbitrary number that we created is a waste for our city.
So I have a question in correlation with Ms. Duff. Jim, can we make an amendment at council meeting about the 400-foot, see where that goes on a vote, and then make a motion again on the 1,000 feet? Because I don't know where council's really at as far as the linear feet of separation. So whether it's 400 or 1,000 or somewhere in between, can council weigh in and do a vote on that? Now, I would say that's my first. The good news is the zoning, let's talk about the zoning request. So pre-submittal has been put in for change the zoning. What is our timeline for that?
Thank you, Mayor Freeman. The rezoning it can move forward probably even before we get an application and process an application for the BAS. So that's been submitted. We have to go to Planning and Zoning Board for a recommendation. We have to, and then back to council for a decision. The one thing I'll say about this parcel of land that is zoned, the RM4 that is being requested to be rezoned, it's kind of a pocket of residential in the middle of some commercial and industrial use. So staff has no concerns with the actual rezoning request. So we're maybe looking at 2 to 3 months for that process, for the rezoning.
Okay. And Mayor, if I may add something to this, for the actual NextEra site to develop it for the battery energy storage systems, they would have to amend the current PAD that's in place. So that project itself would have to come through for a rezoning to City Council to address those site plan changes. So these can happen at the same time if they chose to, or they could process the rezoning of the RM parcel prior to. But for the development of that site itself, it is also going to be about a 3-month period for that to go through the approvals.
You know, we haven't heard from the applicant. I know they have a representation. I don't know if anyone's here from them, but regardless, so we have approximately a 3-month timeline for, and you're putting all those together, stacking all of them together so that it'd be all in front of council at the same time.
Mayor Freeman, that's correct. Mayor Freeman, that's correct. We can move those forward concurrently.
I think the good news is for District 6, not speaking for the vice mayor, but this was zoned multifamily. Now it's actually being converted to light industrial. Is that correct?
And commercial.
And commercial.
Mayor Freeman and Council or Vice Mayor Summers, that's correct. They're looking at industrial on the western portion of the site, and then some kind of commercial in the request. It would be commercial on the east side, directly adjacent to Ellsworth.
Yeah, and perhaps some retail in there as well. I don't know, but I think the good news is there was multifamily stacked in the light industrial and in there, and it really didn't fit in that. And I know the vice mayor's worked very hard in really not wanting that. So by having the BESS system there has kind of pushed that out and allowed the storage of the battery energy storage system. So I asked the question on the amendment of that, and then go back to Ms. Duff.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. So in order to make a change, after an ordinance is introduced, you cannot make any change to it. You have to reintroduce it. So this ordinance has been introduced for 1,000 feet. So Monday night, you can approve it, or you could not approve it, but you can't change it Monday night, sort of on the fly. That the charter prevents that. The idea is that citizens get an opportunity, 6 days minimum, to see an ordinance before it's adopted by council. So we'd have to reintroduce. And I'll say the second site, and we can do that. So if council, gives us direction, we can introduce another ordinance, and go through that process. I'll say this: the second site has been waiting. This works. The 1,000 feet works for their site. By continuing to sort of delay this, it's delaying their ability to move forward. From our meetings with them, they were always ahead of the third site as far as the progression. So it might take 3 months to rezone the property for the third site, but they were always sort of, third in line also as far as timing. And so I don't know really how much that really delays their ultimate deadline as far as SRP. When we met with SRP, the first and second site were the more sensitive site as far as timelines for SRP when we met with them. So just consider that, because you can adopt the 1,000 feet. Where I'm going is you can adopt the 1,000 feet Monday night. That allows the second site to go forward, and you can change it. We can do it the next month, or we can bring back a 400 feet for discussion along with as the rezoning is occurring. So just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Duffo.
The applicant is going through a purchase agreement for the land based on the 1,000 feet. So we are, by delaying any decision or saying, we can just change it later, they are acquiring land and going through the rezone for it. So there is a certain cost to it. And like I said, the 1,000 feet just sitting there, whether on this property or whatever property it could be in the future, it's just a waste of land. It has no purpose of it. This is land that could have electricity on it. Right now, we have a severe shortage of electricity. We lost a large economic development project over the holiday because SRP could not guarantee the electric that they had planned on. This is something that's dire, and I think this 1,000 feet is costing us not only the cost of electricity, but the cost of this project.
And Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I believe Rachel's potentially pulling it up right now, and she can articulate on this, or Mary, but it's just the residential use would not be allowed. You could have other industrial, light industrial, commercial use. It would just not be residential use. So when you say that about the distance requirement, it's only on the residential land use. I just wanted.
Well, I don't want to think that these 3 projects will be the only projects that we do in the entire city for the best systems. As we know, our entire nation is under this crunch of need for energy. This is the quickest energy that's available right now. I don't think we're going to sit dormant after these 3 projects.
Let's hear from Mr. Heredia.
I guess from that point, Jim or Mary, is there an opportunity for an applicant to submit a special use, what do you call it? Special use permit in the future if we adopt that 1,000-foot requirement, is there some wiggle room where an applicant, say, wants to build a BESS system in West Mesa and it's within 400 to 800 feet or of residential? Is there a special use permit that is allowed that then comes to council and could be voted on based on those set of specific, things that for that site maybe works, right? Is that an option for the future? I'm just thinking, where's the opportunities if in the future we learn a little bit more of these systems and how they act? Is there an opportunity for applicants to do that?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Heredia. The way the current ordinance is written, we kind of followed the model we did with the data centers. So they have to do a PAD in order to put it in place, so council has a decision on where it goes. This does not affect necessarily the two we've got the pre-submittals for. But in the future, if somebody came in on the west side of the city, they'd have to go through a PAD process. We've also included, as we did with data centers, that the development standards couldn't be modified, so that 1,000-foot couldn't be modified through that PAD. So at this point, no, it would be a 1,000-foot separation, the way that staff has recommended the ordinance.
Vice Mayor.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor. Mary, before break, we had asked for the industry to provide us with a map, because what we understand is not every power station in Mesa could support the battery systems. So do we have that map, or did that kind of get lost in the Christmas season?
Vice Mayor, we do have that map. I don't know if we've got it within our presentation or
Okay,
not.
we just had that
I
distributed?
believe we might have emailed it to you, but we can get that to you before Monday, absolutely.
Either. That
Yeah,
was something that
it was
Absolutely.
before the
Because we're having a,
break. There is a
pretty extensive discussion on this, and practically speaking,
Did
what
we
are we
get it?
talking about? How much is it
map?
really going to impact? How many sites are really going to be impacted on this? I mean, we're talking about 1,000 feet, kind of in the abstract. I would like to see really where it comes down to affecting the land use.
And Mayor, council member, to that point, that's where I think we could, I know there's some philosophical differences on this, but from a practical standpoint, I think that you could move forward with this distance requirement with the certainty that the needs right now that SRP has identified in the area are met. They would need future substation construction and deliberation about the compatibility of best systems around those substations in the future to really force a reexamination of the distance requirements. And so I think it buys us some time. We take care of these facilities that are needed, and then by the time that new substations come online, which those don't happen quickly, I'm sure this industry is going to evolve substantially during that time, and we can have we can certainly re-examine those distance requirements, which is what I've heard from several of you, even several of you who support the 1,000-foot, or maybe all of you who support the 1,000-foot, of saying, we understand, though, that this is an evolving technology and something we just need to continue to look at as the future develops.
And
Did you
Mayor,
get your-
Councilmember Goforth, if I could, and this isn't the map of the substations that we were discussing, but this is just our zoning map. And in the proposed ordinance, we're proposing that these be permitted in the GI and HI, which are these darker blue areas. And you can see that there really isn't much residential located near these, so the likelihood of them be affected by the 1,000-foot separation would be very low.
Mayor, if I may, I think what we were asking for, at least what I was asking for, was there are different stations of SRP, but not all of them have the capacity to be able to feed a battery system. And we probably have to work with SRP to get that kind of information. Why are you smiling?
Well, Mayor and Vice Mayor, that's information that SRP doesn't willingly share as far as compatibility necessarily of
Weird.
that. Industry secrets, I guess. But what they have shared, though, is that the location of the substation to the power demand is very important to them. And so when you look at the Elliott Road corridor and you see all of the power users along that area and along Ellsworth, that was driving the need at those particular two substations that are in question with the three sites today. And so in the future, though, you're right, south of the 24, depending on the use and the location of substations, there could certainly be need at that time, but that doesn't exist today.
I think there's, if I may, Mayor, I think there's some truth to that, from the proximity. But I also know that there's a legal reason that they want to do it, because if they put it within a certain distance of the substation, they don't have to go to the ACC to get approval, and that costs money, that costs time. So they're all coalescing. Once again, we're going to have the same problem here. We talk about wasted land and a lack of use. these are necessary for the economy because they support the jobs and industry we want. But as they start to coalesce in a single area, then they impact that area, and there's no jobs related to that site. So now you have acres of space, no jobs. It's the same as another industry that is also very necessary, that is driving the need for this power, that has very few jobs and a whole lot of acres, right? So and it's all focused in certain areas. So once we lose that land, then we can't put it to work for other jobs. There has to be a balance of having access to information, having access to power, but still being able to achieve the economic goals of our community and my district. So I think that's where the balance comes in, and what my concern is seeing a proliferation of these, in addition to the hazards that I am very familiar with and have fought fires on. And so I get it, but I think this for now settles the issue. Everybody can move forward. We can see the power. SRP can get the power that they need out of that. If we have to have a conversation in the future about there is new technologies, we don't see the runaway, we don't see the issues that come, the contamination issues that come with some of the other chemistries that hopefully are working their way out of these systems, then we can have that conversation. That doesn't bother me, but for now, I'm very comfortable with this.
I suggest getting caught up on the technology is here now. And there's been lots of tests around this. We can even require from the applicant to do a plume test as far as if there's anything, but the studies show that the toxins that are emitted aren't going any more than the 100 feet where they have the public safety command centers, and they're equivalent to a house fire, and the frequency is to a house fire. And the way they design these systems now, they don't have runaway because they are individually celled and they haven't seen any spread to another. Anyway, I can go on and on. I can go on for a half hour. I just think given the cost of electricity, the availability of electricity, the need for our economic development, it's worth the consideration not to have this, what I think is an excessive amount of separation.
And SRP is getting the 3 sites that they need, right? And the potential for another one, if it happening in the industrial area where they belong, that's also a possibility too. So this solves the immediate need. It provides for public safety. It provides for the energy needs, and I think it also spreads it out, because if we're going to be nothing but information storage and battery storage, every other community can celebrate their economic development on the backs of the battery that is Mesa. But my hope is that we get 100,000 high-wage jobs in the area and spreading that out. Look what Pinal County's doing. They are denying BESS systems and solar systems because they don't want to be the power system that supplies Maricopa County.
We can't have additional economic development. Right now, we're turning away economic development because we don't have the electricity. SRP is quoting 5 to 7 years, and they are losing electricity by not being able to use the land. So the land, what they have to turn away and not be able to generate, there isn't a replacement for this. So they're actually negative on their commitments,
and that's
because
an unfortunate
they're not unable
consequence
to.
of a concentration of past decisions. And I don't think we should rush to a decision to fix that problem that could negatively impact economic development in the future by using up our
Okay,
land.
Council, I'm going to switch over to Mr. Adams, and then I think there's 2 ladies over here that may want to say something. I don't know. But Mr. Adams, you're up.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Mayor. I'm hearing meritorious arguments on both sides of this issue, and I think we all recognize this is a evolving technology, and to me, it's difficult to decide whether is it 1,000, is it 100, is it 400. You can find a lot of information supporting many of these numbers. My view is this. My understanding is that there's been a great deal of negotiation and discussion over the holidays. I've heard from some of the council who represent some of the parties here. And my understanding is that a compromise has been reached and agreed to under no duress. None of these parties have expressed to me that they were forced under duress to agree with what we have in front of us. So it seems to me that the instant problem, the one immediately in front of us, can be resolved and everyone can move forward, these three, or actually the one, and know what their path forward is. I think we all agree that we're going to revisit this as technology emerges, but we've got a solution to a problem that's been a hot item for quite a while now, and it seems to me that everyone involved is okay with what's on the table. So, and again, without duress, but believe me, these zoning council who I've known for years would tell me if somebody felt their arm was behind their back, and I haven't heard that. So personally, I think we have a solution to the immediate problem. I think we all agree that we're going to revisit this again, and as hard data comes forward, I don't doubt for a moment my colleague has researched this. And there's a great deal of information out there that we can take a look at again. But I think we've got a solution to a problem that the folks involved have said, hey, we're happy. We can move forward. So that's the way I see this. And I'm more than willing and absolutely committed to re-examine these standards as we go down the road. So thank you.
All right. Anything over here?
Sure.
Ms. Goforth?
I would just say, I agree with Rich. That's my understanding as well. I appreciate, Jen, your arguments, and I think, as Rich stated, I think there's arguments on either side to be made. But right now, this is a good solution, and we will probably revisit. So I'm happy to keep it on the agenda as it is.
I waited till last to just hear everyone out. And Jen, I did want to thank you for your arguments for economic development, because I appreciate that you're passionate about it. And I see that you've done a lot of extensive research. I also had to do a lot of reading about this particular topic because BESS was new to me in terms of just what it is, how it functions. And I was reflecting on our prior meetings and I remembered one of the concerns that Vice Mayor Scott Summers had was not necessarily the risk of just one of the battery energy systems exploding, it was the acute inhalation. And I did a little bit of research myself and looked at UL Solutions, FM Global, National Fire Protection Association, and there were real world incident data from McMikin, I think I said that right, Arizona, Moss Landing, South Korea, BESS Fire Series, where they did see that we had serious concerns that in a 1,000-foot diameter, there is actual acute inhalation of toxic and poisonous gases that are emitted from these. And I was just remembering that was one of the reasons Scott said, hey, I'm concerned about this. And that the residential location was kind of in an awkward spot in that it was right by the highway. And so I personally, after listening to your argument and listening to Mr. Summers and Mr. Adams, I was torn as to whether or not we should look at rezoning the distance. Was 1,000 feet too far? Was it too close? Did we need to have something else there, like light industrial, commercial? And it does sound to me like, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, if we did in the future want to come back and take a legislative action for any reason, we can do that if we find that that is something that would be beneficial for us in reducing the feet.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, yes. You can come back and change the zoning code and change the distance. In fact, the zoning code is probably the code that has changed the most, and we're going to have 2 presentations on changing the code here
But,
today.
yeah, I know it's on our agenda.
Yeah, so we can come back and change it.
So I just wanted to let everybody know, I actually read up on it. I was doing some research. I pulled up my little resources that I had to make sure I speak clearly on it. I think that because we have a solution right now, it is good. I appreciate that we're looking at light industrial and commercial so that we do have development in that area. We can actually use the land going forward. So that's what I was thinking of. Those are my thoughts, and I appreciate the work that everyone did on this.
All right, everyone, thank you for your comments. I received a letter a couple of days ago from the Western Way, TWW, joins the Arizona Fire Marshals Association in support of the adoption of the 2024 International Fire Code, the IFC, in Arizona, specifically because of the critical important safety updates the IFC makes for battery energy storage systems. And so the Arizona State Fire Marshal Office is going to adopt this code here very shortly. So with that, we can work with the guidelines of the NFPA 855 and then the International Fire Code, and we can have a further conversation from our fire marshal as well as our chief building official too. And I don't know if they're here, but we can have a later conversation on that. But I just personally, the best systems are extremely important, especially in the southeast part of Mesa. We have the lack of infrastructure out there. The growth has been phenomenal. It's necessary to help uplift our economic development in that area. But the good news is the site that is being questioned for NextEra, moving from RM4 to light industrial commercial aspects will be critical for SRP. And I don't like the 1,000 feet. I can tell you right now, I would do a much lower setback, but we can decide that on Monday's vote, when we vote on the ordinance itself. So if there's nothing else on that topic, council, we can move on. Is there any other items? I have a couple on. Mary may not want to leave, but
You need one of those lumbar pillows, just get comfortable.
I'll just bring it. I have a question on 8D. That's a rezone from RM2 to RM4. Do you want to handle it here or over there?
Mayor, thank you. Evan, would you like a presentation, or do you want to just go through your questions? How did you want to do that?
Well, let's do both.
Okay.
Let's start with Evan. When I said earlier about, we looked for the new year and tackling difficult issues, we just had one of them, and we're going to find some solutions to everything we're going to work on. But
thank you, Mayor, Council. Good morning. This is case ZON 24-998. You're right. This is a specific request to rezone property from multiple residence 2 to multiple residence 4 with a bonus intensity zone overlay and site plan review. And this is for a 15-unit multiple residence development. The subject property is crosshatched on the map here. We are on the east side of Mesa Drive, south of Broadway Road. The general plan place type for this is urban residential, which supports a mixture of land uses. Multifamily residential is a principal land use within the urban residential place type, and RM4 is a permitted use. As I mentioned, this is a request for multiple residence zoning. RM4 allows for a density up to 30 dwelling units per acre. This proposal is at 25.9 dwelling units per acre, so within that density range for RM4. It is an infill site that is currently vacant. Here's a street view from Mesa Drive. There are three buildings on this site. There are the two kind of primary buildings on the east end of the site and a smaller 2-unit building that fronts onto Mesa Drive. There's a 24-foot drive aisle. This is a product that has garages, a 2-car garage on the ground floor. There are pedestrian walkways and amenity areas. There are also 4 guest parking spaces located on the south side of the site there. There are criteria for a bonus intensity zone overlay. Kind of the big one is that it provides distinctive superior quality design and that it meets some environmental performance standards. I'm happy to answer any questions council might have on the deviations. I won't go through them in detail. They're outlined in your report, but again, if there are any questions, I'm happy to get into that. The bonus intensity zone overlay kind of focuses on open space and amenities, and this specific proposal includes kind of a unique primary open space feature, which is located at the west end of the primary building right here. So it would be a visual terminus when you come in off of Mesa Drive. And it is a unique open space area that is landscaped. It uses condensate from the air conditioners as secondary water supply. There would be seating and shade, and we included a condition of approval as part of this request to include some additional open space. There's private open space that the applicant is receiving, or is exceeding, excuse me. In multiple residence zoning district, there's a common open space and a private open space, and the amount of private open space is determined by the number of bedrooms. In this scenario, 100 square feet is required. They're providing 120 square feet of open space. Here you can see the landscape plan that is well landscaped. We're using the trees to kind of buffer from the adjacent development, which is multiple residents to the south and an office to the north. You can see some site details. This went to design review board in June. They got some pretty substantial feedback and some comments from the design review board. Staff and the applicant worked together to address the comments that were able to be addressed and to revise the elevations to meet standards. Here you can see the elevations. They did do citizen participation and conducted a neighborhood meeting last January on this. We had no neighbors in attendance. We did receive a phone call from the adjacent neighbor to the north with some concerns about the density and the height. Staff does find that it complies with the 2050 Mesa General Plan and the criteria for a bonus intensity zone overlay and site plan review. Staff is recommending approval with conditions. The Planning and Zoning Board also recommended approval with conditions 5-0. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions council might have.
Well, I started it, so I'll ask the question. Sure. One thing staff reported was, because it's mid-block and on an arterial roadway, 4 guest parking spaces, that there could be overflow parking to the adjacent, to the south building. That was one of staff's notes. That's kind of frustrating when you have an additional to the south. I think it's an RM4 apartment complex, and then potentially people who in the new development could park over there. I mean, how do we handle that?
That's a great question, Mayor. So parking is one of the things that we look at because, as you noted, in general, we try not to have parking overflow. And if there is, there should be a logical area for that to overflow. This is a really unique parcel. And when we talk about infill development, I think this is kind of the textbook example of you have a smaller bypassed parcel that needs some concessions to be developable. So they are exceeding actually their parking requirements because it's 2 spaces per unit. So they are exceeding that. And you're correct, it is mid-block. There's not a lot of place to overflow, but that's one of the things that we need to kind of weigh is with infill development is parking standards versus the developability of the lot. So yes, it is a concern, but it is infill development. It's adjacent to bus stops. They're in close proximity, actually right in front of the apartment building to the south. Mm-hmm. So transit is an option. They're providing a two-car garage for each unit. So it does exceed standards.
Yeah, I guess that's, maybe that would apply if it was RM2 zoning. There might be some overflow parking. I guess where I'm at, I'm trying to understand the urban type density planning to allow, I know there's RM4 to the south, there's RM2 to the north, and then I think single family residence to the east.
That's correct.
And with that, then when I read the BIZ overlay, it said, and this is your quote, BIZ overlays must demonstrate and resulting development will further the goals and objectives of the general plan, specific plans, council policies, and will provide significant social and economic benefits to the city. Okay, help me understand what that's supposed to be.
Sure, Mayor, Council. So when we look at a bonus intensity zone overlay, we want to obviously be consistent and further the intent of the general plan. The urban residential place type allows for a wide variety of zoning districts and densities. And when you look at this portion of Mesa Drive, it is, in Mesa terms, it's pretty dense. There are single-family residents to the east, but a lot of those are duplexes that function, kind of more like multifamily. So when you look at the economic benefits of providing additional housing, it's 15 units. It's a small parcel that would have trouble developing, I think, as another type of use as it is mid-block. Those are some of the things that we look at, and then we say, we understand that the need for this to develop, but where can we exceed standards, which is the kind of purpose of the bonus intensity zone overlay. This applicant is doing it through open space, through a unique open space proposal. Their building architecture has a distinct style that we also feel is unique. They did some things with the condensate and how they're watering the irrigation that are exceeding standards. And that's why staff, when we looked at this and we worked with the applicant to address the comments from the design review board, that's how we recommended approval of this, is that we feel that it meets the intent of the bonus intensity zone overlay.
Okay. Just another question. What's the width of the garages, length and depth of the?
They meet the standards, which is 22 feet in depth and 20 feet in width.
Okay, good. Well, the only thought I have is, when I look at the economic benefits, for that development, even for the neighborhood, the closest grocery store is probably a half a mile, 3/4 a mile away. There's some fuel stations, very few, if not any, doctor's offices. I'm just thinking location, but that doesn't matter. I'm just thinking of the significant social and economic impacts for people who live there that need to be improved in the area. So I just had those questions. I didn't see a dog park. I didn't see a tot, for kids to get out there, to put all this development in there on a small space. I mean, people will have to look elsewhere probably for some type of enjoyment.
Mayor, we actually, that was one of the things that we worked through with the applicant, and we included some additional conditions of approval to make the open space that they are providing more amenitized and to make it a place for people to gather. So it's condition of approval number 3 talks about additional seating and some amenities, shade structures, barbecues, tables, that sort of thing. It is 15 units, so it's a little different in scale than, even the apartment building to the south of that. So I think that the open space that they're providing with that additional condition to provide places for people to gather would meet that intent.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have on that. Council, anything on 8B regarding e-bikes? I'm going to switch gears on you. Does anybody want to talk on e-bikes? Any more conversation? Thank you, Mary. Evan?
Thank you.
Council, you think this is a good start on e-bikes? Any questions on that?
No, I heard Glendale just made some changes to their ordinance on e-bikes. This is another opportunity, I think, as you alluded to, Mayor, that this is a start on tackling the issue. Other cities are doing the same thing and looking at best practices and making changes to these amendments over time. Makes a lot of sense. What's on the table now has already been introduced, so I think we should, and my preference would be to move forward on it, and then we should continue to look at this issue, and I'm happy to do that in the Public Safety Committee.
I have one question just in
transportation.
general about.
I mean, you said a couple of questions on this. Let's go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think.
For speed and type of bikes.
Yeah, I mean, we have both, we have one side that doesn't want them in the parks at all, right? And then the other side that says, we like to ride in the park, ride through the park. And so I think having that low speed limit is probably a good compromise between those. I was actually on my e-bike a couple days ago and riding 5 miles an hour is really slow. I had a hard time staying balanced. It's so slow. But I do think it's a good starting point. Again, we may not get it exactly right this first time. And these have come up kind of fast and they're now proliferating, and so I think it's a good starting point, and at some point we may have to revisit this. But my question is on, can you ride your e-bike? I know you can ride a bike on a sidewalk. Can you ride an e-bike on a sidewalk in the city of Mesa?
Yes.
And that will not change?
Correct.
Okay. Good, because that's where I was.
So Haley, I have a question. The word, I know we're changing multi-use to shared use path designation. So does that mean the SRP canal system, Jim, or is it implied that is the SRP canal system? Because shared use path could mean parks, but is it including?
Correct. Yes,
The canal
Mayor,
system. I
Mayor
see
and
Eric
Council,
getting that.
yes, the shared use path does include, and because that's the language that's already used in the transportation code to refer to the canal paths, so that's why we're changing it to shared use path, so that's the same language used across all of our city code.
Okay.
She did a great job of answering the question. So I think that's just, it's really to make things consistent. And in the past 10 years since I've been here, the paths along the SRP canal, along ADOT, that transportation maintains, we're calling shared use paths.
As well as the flood control areas too, like I think out in District 5, the Maricopa County flood control area, there's pathways in there.
So
Are we utilizing those?
So the shared use paths are specific to what Mesa has constructed and is maintaining. What's out in the current Maricopa flood control areas are not City of Mesa pathways. They're open to the public and people are utilizing them, but they're not under the jurisdiction of the City of Mesa.
Okay, thank you. Any comment, Ms.
Yeah. Remember when we discussed this before the break, there was a mention that the state was creating an ordinance or updating their ordinance. I know they already have one. Whenever that comes through, will it preempt ours or I don't know how that works.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I have been reviewing the different legislative bills that have been proposed regarding e-bikes. And so right now, there's 2 different bills that look like they're amending the same part of the Arizona Revised State Statutes. And within both of them, they're proposing a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit on multi-use paths, shared use paths, sidewalks, and then a 5-mile-per-hour if you're passing someone. But then there's always language within that legislative bill that says that local authorities and local jurisdictions can choose to implement lesser speed limits if they want.
Okay, so it would give us the ceiling
Yes.
of what we can do.
Yes.
And, I wish I had an e-bike. I want to have an e-bike. But on an e-bike, you can choose not to have electric assist. Is that correct? Yeah, so I know that 5 miles per hour or something like that, but I would think just whatever a normal bike provides and trying to get it near 5, but I don't know. Okay, I'm just trying to understand a little bit more on what's on the horizon. Thank you.
I'll just make a final comment because I sat down with Dan Butler, our police chief, and Ken Cost, our previous police chief, to discuss this issue a little bit over lunch. And one of the things we're looking at is working with our state legislature to significantly differentiate e-bikes, specifically 1 and 2s, from these electric motorcycles. Because I think what part of the problem is recognition is that the issue a lot of folks are having isn't with e-bikes, it's with these little electric motorcycles that everybody thinks is an e-bike. And this is where the state might have some great jurisdiction to, in the sale, registrations and licensings of these things. So we're going to be working on that as well. So it's important to understand the difference between a battery-assisted e-bike, like the council member drove on a sidewalk apparently, and what is really an electric motorcycle. Well, she called me old in a previous meeting, so.
Probably more than one time, I'm sure.
Probably.
So are you making the distinction, though, that the motorcycle is without pedals?
The motorcycle is without pedals.
Okay, that's
and then
what-
there's that 3 that's a little, we're going to have to tackle.
goes over 28.
Yeah, that's another one we're going to have to tackle, but I think looking at the clear distinction between the two and what's causing the most issues, listening to the complaints, when you listen to them, it's really, this is not an e-bike, this is an electric motorcycle. And if we can get some assistance from the state, I think this is where we can make a huge dent in the problem. And even the enforcement we're seeing, and I think Glendale did some. There was a lot of good stuff in Gilbert. When you see who they're going after, it's like that's a motorcycle. That's not an e-bike. Yeah.
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor Summers, when I was looking at the legislation, they currently don't call out the different classes of e-bikes right now. And so as I'm providing staff comments on that, I can be sure to include that as something that might be worth the state looking at this point, because it doesn't differentiate
Maybe
right now.
maybe having a brief meeting with Ken Cost, former chief, Mr. Cost, right, is what we're calling him now, would be a good idea, because we just had this meeting just a couple of days ago.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I only have
Ms.
one more
Goforth.
comment, and I kind of hesitate to open this can of worms, but I think I did last time, but I don't think I was satisfied with your answer, Eric. So the one thing that bothers me a little bit is that with the shared use path, and this is related to e-bikes, that we build them according to transportation guidelines or transportation criteria, and we're regulating them under parks, right, with the miles per hour 15. Why are we doing that? And does that make sense?
So Mayor,
And am I correct? I'm
Councilmember
correct in saying that,
Goforth.
right? And
it's my understanding that the 15 mile per hour speed limit has always existed on the shared use paths or the canal paths. And so it's not that we're regulating, it's not that the Parks Code is regulating transportation code, it's that we wanted them to be consistent and mirror each other in the language that they were using. And so there's a separate speed limit requirement of that 5 miles per hour that's in the ordinance right now within the parks. And then the transportation code has always had that 15 mile per hour speed limit, and then they just reiterate what is supposed to be happening in the park. So am I correct in that?
that's under transportation too. You go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor and council member, yeah, remember there's 2 ordinances, and one is the parks and one is the transportation, and the 15 miles per hour is in the, I'll call it the transportation ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that's satisfactory. Thank you.
I have a really quick question. HOA, private neighborhoods, how does this impact them? Does this ordinance apply to private neighborhoods, or do they have their own governance?
So Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, this ordinance would not apply to HOA neighborhoods or parks. However, we will be partnering with HOAs, letting them know what direction has come out from the city on this, to see if they decide to do anything similar to that.
Okay, yeah, I'm only asking because I was in a neighborhood recently, and the kids on their little e-bikes were like ripping through their HOA park. And I was like, oh, I'm seeing it firsthand now. And then I thought, well, what if they call the police? If they call the police, would this ordinance apply to those kids in that park? How does that transfer over into a private neighborhood?
So Mayor and Councilmember, I think that we'd have to think about a couple of these things because there's a couple other aspects to it. So it depends. So some HOAs also have private roads and then private sidewalks. So then that's a difference as opposed to some HOAs. You're still on a City of Mesa sidewalk. And in addition, as the Vice Mayor pointed out, many of these that are ripping through the parks aren't e-bikes. They're actually electric motorcycles, and then they're regulated under state statute. So it's possible they fall under a state statute, even though they're in an HOA. But I'd have to parse it out and think about it. But the concept of what we're doing right here is not intended to apply to private property. But there are state statutes and other regulations that may apply to the what effectively are motorcycles or electric motorcycles.
Okay, thank you. Well, my friends asked me if this was going to affect them because I told them, funny that this is happening. We're actually in discussion about this right now. And then my other question was, because this is kind of, it seems like a new problem we're looking for solutions to because of the fact that I think e-bikes are not going to stop. We're going to keep getting them. We're going to see little motorcycles everywhere as well. Does this warrant like a future discussion about having walking paths versus biking paths in our parks and our shared use areas where we can really create an even more safe area? Like, I'm thinking people walking, and then if e-bikes outnumber individuals that are just walking or jogging or running, I'm just throwing this out there. Like, is this a preemptive discussion to a future discussion of we have so many of these now, we actually need to consider their own separate path structure?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I think that as with everything, this is something that we can look at in the future, but as far as capital improvement project capabilities that we would have to do that type of infrastructure required to add that within the parks would be pretty extensive. Yeah. But I definitely think it's something that we can continue to keep an eye on and see what other cities also continue doing and addressing as e-bikes grow in popularity, while still making sure that we're making a safe space for all patrons to enjoy our parks.
Yeah. You don't have any studies of any other cities that have done that specific thing?
No.
Capital improvement? Okay.
No, but I can look into that.
Thank you.
If I may, Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, I've seen this in other communities outside of Arizona, right? You've seen this where they do have, whether or not it's actually physically separated or it's just a demarcation by even a paint line where there is a separation between pedestrian and other users. And so, especially on wider sort of shared use type paths, you've seen this in other communities outside of Arizona. I don't know if, I can't remember seeing it within Arizona, but I think your point is very valid that we might have to look at this on sort of the wider paths and the shared use paths. And so you do see this in other communities outside Arizona.
Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is definitely an issue that is not going to go away, and we're going to see more and more of them. And Mayor correctly pointed out that a neighborhood where my son lives, Lehigh Crossing, has got a great number of these things, and they're going pretty fast in there. So, my concern remains. I recognize that we need to state some regulation here, and fine, 15 miles an hour, we start there, but we have posted speed limits on all of our public streets, and we have a means of enforcing those speed limits, whether it be motor officers with radar or speed cameras or whatever. My concern remains we're putting into place a set of regulations that we really don't have a means of enforcing efficiently anyway. I don't think we're going to set a motor officer out on a bike path with a radar gun. Maybe we are, I don't know. But so the enforcement remains an issue. And another concern I have is that I think most responsible people will ride responsibly anyway. It's the folks who are irresponsible that are causing us the problems we see in our parks, our paths. I received an email from a concerned citizen saying, what about moms and dads with strollers? What about toddlers? This is another step towards another means for irresponsible people to be irresponsible and put other people in risk. So I recognize that we need to put these standards in place. My concerns remain. how do we enforce these? I certainly hope this isn't something that just continues to be something we debate and discuss until somebody really gets hurt or killed by one of these things. I hope that doesn't happen. But so I guess the enforcement issue is we're going to put the rules in place. It would be as though we put our speed limits in place on our public streets and we do away with traffic enforcement and we take down the cameras. That doesn't make sense. So those are the concerns that remain with that I still have. And I agree. I think this is an evolving thing. I think we're going to see many more than many less. And so how do we deal with those irresponsible riders? And how do we handle enforcement? So just my thoughts on the matter. I don't necessarily oppose this. I just think it's a very complicated matter that isn't going to get any easier. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional, Eric or Haley, on it? Council?
I'd like
Ms.
to
Duff?
make just a couple of comments as suggestions. We do have park rangers, although they don't issue tickets, but they have a way of monitoring what's going on in the park. I know in parks where we've had problems, social problems, whatever the problem is in the park, we have been able to stand up cameras, that are monitoring it, and the real-time crime center, and we can have, send out an officer if we find there's a recurring problem at a park and it needs to be addressed. It's just consistent. So there are a few measures that we do for other issues in parks beyond bikes that we try to control the behavior of people beyond bikes. Anyway, there are a few things that we do to try to control the behavior of people in parks overall, and I think implementing them. I think the biggest thing is just making people aware of what the ordinance is. It does bring in, I think, a majority of people to be in compliance, but when there is no rule, you think, freedom. But if there is a rule, just like for us when we're driving, we try to pay attention to the speed limit and drive at the speed that has been presented to us, because it is with factor of being safe for everybody involved and being predictable for the environment around us. So I think it takes the care of the majority. If there are bad actors, I think we have a few tools in our tool shed to see what we can do.
Okay, I know that some of the cities are deploying drones, and I had a conversation with Chief Butler this past week about, they're deploying and they have the capability. If there's a hot area that is having e-bike issues or parks issues, they can deploy drones versus, patrol officers or even motor officers, but probably everybody combined. But regardless, we have the resources to do it. I think that we can flex really easily to fix a problem in neighborhoods and parks where it might be. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just confirming on 3A, that's barbecue chicken. It's a recommendation for denial, and I see on the last sentence, a yes vote is the item to consent order recommending disapproval of the liquor license application. So
Mayor, that was one of the items I was going to bring to council's attention. We did just get notification that they have met all their requirements. And so when you see your revised agenda that comes out this afternoon, it will reflect that it's ready for or suggested for approval.
Okay, nice. The other one I had personally, I take it personal, but so is the Vice Mayor. We're getting 2 new hazmat trucks, 2 E1 Cyclone trucks, $2.7 million trucks for our fire and life safety. And having been on a hazmat for quite a few years, same with the Vice Mayor, know how important those apparatus are because they're specialty units and can deploy not only in our city but neighboring communities for resources.
What color are they?
White. not red, but
And,
yeah.
and Mayor, I would just note on that one. One is a replacement, but as part of our effort with the new Station 223 in North Mesa, that will allow us to actually expand our hazmat coverage by bringing another hazmat unit online. And so one of the trucks will be for that new unit. So it will be able to allow us to better disperse our hazmat response throughout the city.
And when are we building 223, Mr.
Well,
Butler?
as you know, Mayor, we are working through some issues on the site, but we're looking forward to construction on that starting as soon as possible.
What happened? I got 224.
I don't know. I wanted to retire out of 223, but that never happened. Okay, so council, any other items? I think we tackled some big ones start the new year.
I
Ms.
had
Taylor?
one question on 6B. I just wanted to double check, Scott and Jim. This is a lot of chapters to the Mesa City Code pertaining to administrative review and compliance. We're only aligning the language with the Arizona Revised Statute.
Mary's going to give a full presentation
part of your
on that
presentation.
coming up next. Yes, so.
Thank
she'll address
you.
those questions.
Okay.
All right, well, we're losing council members, but
And Mayor, I would also just like to note, when the revised agenda comes out this afternoon, HR and legal have finalized the charter officer revisions to their contracts that had been discussed during the annual review, and so those will be reflected on the agenda that's released this afternoon as well.
all right, thank you. All right, so I see we're done with item 1 of our review of the agenda for Monday. We'll move over to item 2A, is a presentation on the proposed amendments to Title II and Title 11 related to the organization and duties of the Planning and Zoning and Design Review Board. Wow, that gave some people time.
Amendments to code. This is why I ran.
Sorry, I didn't know. All right, and actually, you can see, because my presentation's not going to be as long.
Do we need a little recess for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, let's take 5 minutes.
Okay. Mary and Rachel, we're going to take about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. We'll be right back. All right, we have that side. We need
the city manager.
Ms. Taylor. There we are.
We have Jim.
All right, we can go ahead.
A lawyer, we're good now.
Yeah, we're good.
We got a lawyer.
All right, we have Mr. Adams. She's over there. Well, okay, welcome. We're going to hear item 2A is a presentation on proposed amendments to Title II and Title 11 related to the organization and duties of the Planning and Zoning Board and the DRB, known as the Design Review Board. Mary and Rachel, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Freeman. Thank you, Council. Next slide. So we have been hearing from City Council over the last couple of months of concerns with the votes that are coming in terms of the recommendations coming to Council for some of the key items that Council is making decisions on. So based on that and seeing that we're seeing some of the attendance decline for the Planning and Zoning Board, we know they have a really important and essential function. They are the recommending body on so many of the at least from our department, the items that are coming to Council. And because they're making those significant, or recommendations on those significant items, it's really important that we have a fully seated board. And so we also want to respond to the Development Advisory Forum, because when we don't have a fully seated board, it can result in delays, it can impact transparency for residents who might show up for a meeting and we don't have a quorum. So in looking at what we've, options that are out there, staff is going to make 2 proposals related to the Planning and Zoning Board today. The first is that we add 3 alternates to the Planning and Zoning Board. This will help us to ensure that we can always have a fully seated board of 7 members who are making recommendations to the City Council. It helps us to protect quorums so that all of the meetings, we can provide certainty again for the development community and for our residents. It also helps us to build a pipeline for future candidates board members who actually sit on the board and aren't alternates. So it helps us kind of in that training of future potential board members. And it allows the chair to seat alternates on a rotating basis as needed. In doing this, we're also looking to modify the composition of the Planning and Zoning Board. Currently, our Design Review Board has recommendations or requirements for specific design professionals to sit on the Design Review Board. And so we're looking to also have those types of qualifications on our Planning and Zoning Board. We're looking at the composition to be 3 design professionals that would include 1 contractor or developer, and then 4 community representatives. And then with the 3 alternates that we're proposing, we're looking to have at least 1 design professional to, again, maintain that design expertise on the board. This somewhat mirrors the DRB composition, and so that's why we're looking to make this recommendation, because as you're all aware, and this is the presentation that Rachel is going to do next on House Bill 2447, which the governor signed last March, it actually requires our legislative bodies in the state to establish an administrative review process related to design plans that are based on objective standards. And so with because of that bill from the state, because of what we've heard from council, what we've done is we've looked at how the Planning and Zoning Board can help us to streamline certain processes that are occurring within the city in terms of some of the applications we're seeing, because we have to do that administrative review. And so in what we're proposing as it relates to design approval is that based on the state legislation, we're looking to combine our site plan and design review processes to streamline the processes into 1 type of application for our development community. This will align the site plan reviews and the design reviews into a process which will make it a lot easier for our applicants, because currently they go through 2 different processes. It also will help the staff member to be able to bring all of the concerns to 1 board who are going to be making a decision on that. It then aligns the responsibilities of those reviewing and approving bodies, and we've outlined the 3 bodies below. So the planning director, in the administrative review changes that Rachel will be giving you the details on, if they meet all of those development and design standards, those objective design standards that the state is requiring us to put in place, the planning director would be able to approve that site plan and that design review. If they're not requesting a rezoning, any kind of a PAD, a BIZ, a council use permit, or something that has to go to another body, then they would be able to have that planning director approval. The design review board would be looking at those cases where an applicant comes in and is asking for alternative compliance, so they don't necessarily want to meet all of the objective design standards, but what they want is the alternative compliance that we've provided an opportunity for in the code. They would also be making a recommendation on the municipal projects. They currently are the approving body of municipal projects, so we're looking to have them as recommendations to the planning director to make those final decisions. And then, as directed by council, council can always ask or refer a project to the DRB for their input. We've also put in a provision where the planning director could refer a project. So if there is a key project, something large scale, where we think the design review board could provide some expertise, the planning director would have that ability to refer that design review up to them. It would only be the design review being referred up to them. And then the planning director appeals. So if the planning director is to deny one of their the design review request, there's always got to be an appeal process. So they would be the appeal body to the planning director's decisions. There are also, in some of our PC districts and in some of the previous cases that have been approved, there are sometimes specific requirements that design review board has to be the approving body. So there's kind of these offset or kind of these odd cases where once in a while they will be an approving body. But for the most part, what they're going to be doing is recommending on municipal projects and looking at those alternative compliance. That will probably be a bulk of what the DRB will do.
Mary, you have a question?
Mary, explain to me, so how is the planning director going to refer to the DRB if the only thing that goes to the planning director is if it meets all the objective standards? And if it meets the objective standards, how do you add a layer of compliance onto that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, we have actually identified specific criteria that if a case maybe has significant economic impacts, and I don't, those in the city, Medina Station, for example, if a project came in there, they were meeting all of the objective standards, that's not necessarily a good example because they have their own design standards. But we would be able to refer that up for them to be looking at it because of that significant citywide potential impact. So there are criteria that we're building into the
Objective standards?
Into the code amendments that we are bringing forth to council, and they would have to meet those criteria for the planning director. So it's not like the planning director could just get up one day and say, I'm in a bad mood, I'm going to refer your project up. They have to meet specific requirements. And then the last piece would be the Planning and Zoning Board, and this is why that composition recommendation from us is what we think is really important, because now if someone is asking for a rezoning, a PAD, a BIZ, a council use permit, or an SUP, that design review would be done by the Planning and Zoning Board. So what it does is it takes the design review board out of that process. So it'd go from staff review, recommendation to Planning and Zoning Board, who would look at the site plan, the building, the landscaping, all of those design elements, and make a comprehensive recommendation to the city council for the design review, the site plan, and all of those other processes that are coming to council. So it kind of streamlines it, and we are able to kind of remove one of those additional reviews for the applicant. So it helps them with that. They would also, if we had a PC district come in, they would look at the design review. That those types of districts sometimes require specific design guidelines and standards. So similar to what we did with Medina Station or Fiesta, where they had their own design standards and guidelines, we took that to DRB for a recommendation, but now we wouldn't be doing that. It would just be the P&Z looking at it, which is why that composition of having those design professionals on P&Z would be so important if we move forward.
So now we have two different bodies that are going to be evaluating design review. So you could have, you could have a project that got different feedback from one than the other, right?
There would only ever, I'm sorry, Mayor,
Just
Councilmember,
not on the
go
same
forth.
project. I'm just saying, we now have two different bodies. That's not how it works now, right? We don't have, P&Z doesn't do design review. So now they're going to do design. So now we have these two separate bodies. They're going to be different. They're going to have different feedback. So I don't know how that's going to be consistent.
So Mayor, Councilmember, go forth. I think the consistency is that staff is going to be looking at it. Staff is going to be making recommendations, and staff is going to bring that consistency in it. And again, remember, DRB has never been an approval authority. They've only ever been a recommending authority on cases, and then the planning director actually approves the design review based on those recommendations. So the DRB may say, the buildings are too close together. Then the planning staff works with them to address the DRB comments, but the planning director right now is the one approving those projects, not the DRB. They are a recommending body only. So it's the planning director and P&Z that now will be and council will actually be the approval authority on those cases that go to P&Z, not P&Z. So the Planning and Zoning Board won't approve any of the design review. They're making a recommendation to council on design review. So it's the planning director and council that will be making those decisions.
Maybe I can, if I could jump in maybe and try to explain some of the background. I think you did a great job. So part of this stems from the changes from the state and the requirement that we review and approve based on objective standards. And historically, the Design Review Board has always given us additional input to consider design-wise that is beyond what's required in the code. But we can no longer use those recommendations and those comments in our decision-making. So it really changes kind of the scope of the Design Review Board. The other piece of this is that we had the two processes for site plan review and design review. And design review looks specifically at building elevations, landscape plans, photometrics, which are lighting plans. The site plan review does those also, but also has a site plan. So there was already an overlap of what they were both reviewing, but applicants were required to have two separate applications to go through kind of two separate paths that kind of aligned in timing, but not quite. So this helps really consolidate that and provide, more expedited review. But as Mary was saying, design review was only a recommending body before. So since we can't use that subjective comments from them, we felt this was a great opportunity to then kind of align all the applications into one development review, that we could use a design review board. If we do have some requests for deviations from standards, they could take a look at it based on the criteria that we are modifying in the text amendments and give us a recommendation. But then most of those other cases, I'm sorry, my dry mouth, that would go to city council and need planning and zoning board's recommendation already, they could continue through that path as it is.
And if I could, Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, I think Rachel brought up a really good point. Planning and Zoning Board does look at building elevations. They do look at landscape plans. They do look at the design. It's all part of that site plan review. And so there was that kind of layering of the design review on those plans. So we're kind of removing that at this point. And the state statute is kind of helping make that happen.
Is that it?
That
Ms.
actually-
Goforth? Wait, Ms. Goforth, is that?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to work through it a little bit more in my head as you go through, but thank you for that.
Vice Mayor.
Yeah, this is a word soup sandwich. Trying to figure this out because I thought I had it in my head because there seemed to be DRB was doing design, P&Z was doing site plan, and now it's trying to marry these two together, even though there was a little bit of overlap. The part about now it comes to council, is this going to be an administrative act of council or a legislative act of council?
So I'll start and then Jim can chime in. So the way that the state statute is written, we need to have those objective standards and we need to have site plan that is an administrative approval by staff. It's only when they ask for any kind of a deviation that it would come to council for a decision. So if they're asking for the PAD, the rezoning, the BIZ, if they need a CUP, anything where there's another decision that needs to be made outside of just site plan, then it would come to council.
Mayor and Vice Mayor, Council, I'd add one more to that is if they're seeking to modify a stipulation on a prior zoning case, that's also would come back to council as a rezoning, and many times, sometimes that involves a site plan. So that would still say as a legislative act in a rezoning and that modification to that site plan due to a prior stip.
I've made this comment in the past, and I'm sure you remember that we seem to see quite a few administrative acts brought to council, which is like, I can't change this. My vote has already been predetermined. There's no even reason to see it anymore. If it has to be approved by you or P&Z, bringing it up to us is just a waste of ink. And it'd be great to clean up the council stuff. I don't want to see more stuff coming to us where we have no legislative authority to make a change or to vote on it. And if this cleans that up, I'm very happy with that.
Well, I think we'll hear about that in the next presentation, right? Some of this.
In more detail, that's correct, Mayor.
Can I ask one quick question? So is it my understanding that ultimately we are taking an applicant's work and we're consolidating the amount of applications they have to fill out, which were originally through two different boards, if you will. One, which had approval authority, one which did not technically. So design review board would make recommendations, but they would not approve anything. Whereas planning and zoning would also make recommendations, take the recommendations from design review board, and they would approve or disapprove. Is that right?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, it's somewhat correct. It would depend on the application type. A lot of times the Planning and Zoning Board is a recommending body, depending on the application type, to City Council. So they would either approve or they would make a recommendation to council who would approve.
Okay, but if the applicant fits all of the objective standards that are not only required by the city, but also by the state, then they would not come to us for any type of approval. Is that correct?
No, Councilmember Taylor, the way that that works is that the state doesn't have any objective standards that have to be met. What they've done is said the city has to identify objective standards that an applicant needs to meet. They would still have to go through the process. They'd still have to do the site plan, submit their elevations, and do all of that. And then the planning director would approve their plan if they don't ask for any deviations from anything in the Mesa zoning ordinance.
Which is rare.
It is rare.
So you said they have to meet objective standards that are set by the city. So all objective standards are subjective at some point. So who created those objective standards? Or am I totally fast forwarding into the next presentation?
Councilmember Taylor, you are actually going into the next presentation, but it's a good question because we currently have a lot of objective standards in our zoning code. We also have a lot of design guidelines that we are looking to codify. So staff has worked based on projects that we've had, based on the objective standards that are currently in the code to define those objective standards. And they're not subjective, they have to be measurable, and we have to be able to say it's this many feet, it's this many square feet of open space. So they have to be objective that are measurable. And that's what Rachel is going to get into in the next presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor and Mary, I think what the legislature was specifically trying to address there, which you highlighted, was the fact that there are objective standards that municipalities had, but they felt that because of other boards, other commissions, that then the industry was being subjected to subjective standards that added cost, added time to their process. And so that's exactly, I don't think there was as much concern about the objective standards that municipalities have. It was just the addition of subjective standards on top of those objective standards. Is that correct?
I think that's
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but now, can I just say, but now,
subjected to the
as Councilmember Taylor pointed out, it's going to be the rare case that it's like, oh yeah, we hit every one, move on. They're going to end up in the same place, is my, maybe.
Mr.
my
Adams.
sort of guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. I'm fully supportive of the proposals here that will hopefully allow us as a council to see votes from P&Z that the ayes and the nays total 7, as opposed to 4-0, 5-0. We've seen way too much of that, and these are far too important matters to not be heard by the full sitting board. So I'm totally supportive of that. Just for clarification, I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but we're reacting here to the state, the legislature, for better or worse, stepping in and removing some autonomy or ability of Mesa to determine its own destiny here by saying not. And Mr. Butler, I hear your comments, and I think that probably was the impetus behind that. And there's sometimes unintended consequences, which means we no longer have as much local control as we used to. But so I get that, but I want to just clarify the difference between the Administrative Act and the Legislative Act. And so this question for you, Mr. Smith. The Administrative Act, it's just something that we do as a formality. It says, the statute says you shall, and therefore we shall. The Legislative Act, in the past, we could just simply say, no, I just don't like it. And I don't have to justify why. Is that primarily the difference between the two?
Mayor and Councilmember Adams, yes, in sort of a very simplified sense. And I see it sort of on a scale of discretion. And so when you're looking at a legislative act, the scale of discretion is incredibly high. And it is as you articulated. And on the administrative act, yeah, as long as if you comply with the objective standards, then yes, then you can't impose an additional requirement that's not there. And so I think you articulated it correctly.
And I have, over the years, a project goes through staff, they make their comments, and then it goes to design review. Then the applicant adjusts their plans. and to meet staff's approval. And then it goes to design review, and design review has some additional comments in order to making sure that there's nothing outstanding for P&Z approval. They make those. So there's a certain amount of frustration and cost and delay involved in that. And I think this is just tightening it up quite a bit for those that should be a streamlined approval. So I think that's the objective.
Okay, thank you, council. So you have direction to move forward on that? Is that, I'm hearing consensus with that.
So Mayor Freeman, this is on the agenda for Monday. I think it's item 7A. So this is on the agenda for Monday.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move next to item 2B is a presentation and proposed amendments to Title 11 related to administrative reviews as required by state statute. Oh, Mary, you changed seats again. Presented by Rachel and Mary.
All right. Morning, Mayor, Council. So we'll kind of continue this discussion and build upon some of the requirements of the House bill. But in doing so, we really wanted to discuss the correlation between these changes, the state legislation, and what we've been hearing from council and the development community over the last couple of years as we look to really improve our processes. So we've heard a lot from council within the last few years about improving the development review process and making it more efficient, looking at eliminating redundancies, improving our internal coordination when it comes to the reviews that are done between departments, using data for decision-making, and then really just overall improving the environment for the development in the city. And from the development community, we've kind of heard a lot of the same sentiments, but more specifically to them about improving and expanding administrative approvals of site plans and plats, revising stringent standards for the major and minor site plan amendment approval criterias, about streamlining infill and redevelopment within the city, about allowing more administrative approvals and a flexibility, about minimizing the uncertainty of the design review process, as we've discussed, and then really some good feedback about, continuing to be transparent and publish our review schedules. And then in conjunction, we have House Bill 2447 that was signed by the governor last spring. And what this bill does is it requires municipalities to allow administrative approvals with no public hearing for site plans and development plans. And those reviews and approvals have to be based on objective standards. So this beginning of summer, we brought to you the land division text amendments. So you have already done a part of this by approving those amendments, which now any plats, preliminary plats, final plats, land splits, those are all done as an administrative function. So this is the second piece of this now, where we are looking at the objective standards and we're looking at our site plan review process, our design review process. So as Councilmember Taylor mentioned, this is a really big text amendment. I think there's maybe 150 some pages, and it touches about 50% of the zoning code. So we tried to kind of break this down into some key topics and changes that you'll see in there. So one of them is redefining what the minor and major site plan modifications are, the criteria for those. Another part of this is looking at developing objective design standards, also streamlining our development review process, as we've been discussing, and then just cleaning up different discrepancies and consistencies with the code to make it easier to use and really improve the clarity of the document. So I'll go through each one of these in a little more detail, but acknowledging that there's a lot behind each one of these as well. So the first part of this, and this goes back to a lot from what we heard from the development community about our major and minor site plan criteria, and really looking at ways to streamline that and improve it. So what we are looking at doing is currently we have a number of criteria that determines whether a site plan modification is minor or major. An example of that, which is probably the most common trigger of what makes something a major, is if you have a change in your building square footage on a site plan that's 5,000 square feet or 10% of the gross total square footage of the development, whichever one of those is less. If it exceeds that threshold, that automatically kicks it to a major site plan modification, which often requires it to go all the way back to city council. While it's great to have, a very clear criteria, a one-size-fits-all doesn't really work well with a lot of projects because they're very different in scale and scope. So when you're looking at a large industrial project, a change of 5,000 square feet is a drop in the bucket compared to if you just have a standalone retail pad. So what we are proposing is to really pare this down to be that if there is a site plan that was approved by city council and it was stepped to an ordinance that said you must comply with this site plan, if there was a change of use in that site plan, if they wanted to come forward, change the site plan, and they're changing a use that was shown on the site plan, that would be a major modification that would go back to city council for your review and action. So this will capture a couple different things. So when you have a change of use, it affects zoning standards. So there's different requirements for parking, for example, for different uses within the zoning code. There's also different review procedures for various uses. But this also really captures some different impacts you see from various uses. So you might see, an increase in traffic generated from one use to another. So we feel that will capture some of those external effects as well. But I think a big part of this is that we wanted to ensure that when council is acting in its legislative authority and you come before you and you have a rezoning and a site plan, and you're considering whether you want to rezone a parcel or annex a parcel into the city, it may often depend on the project that's before you and, what's being presented. And if they, wanted to change something, if you were promised that you would have these great sit-down restaurants, and then they came back and said, no, we want to turn these 3 into drive-through facilities, you may have made a different decision in your original approvals. So we want to make sure that those come back to you for consideration.
Rachel?
Yes.
Rachel, but isn't that the same use? I mean, how are you defining use?
And yes, I will.
Okay,
I can
thank
get to that, yeah. So I don't have a slide that specifically says, but we did create a definition for what a change of use is. And within Chapter 86 of our zoning ordinance, it is specifically all the use classifications within the city. So it's every use that's listed in our land use tables that, specifically has what the process is for it. So if they're changing from one of those defined uses to another defined use, that would be a change of use. Or a change of a defined use, and maybe it's something that's not even defined in our zoning ordinance. And we have seen that recently where we have kind of emerging technologies that we don't have defined. That also would be a change of use. And I'll kind of give a couple of examples here of what this might look like. So, for example, full-service restaurant is its own individual use classification. So this would be your sit-down restaurant. If they wanted to change that to a restaurant with a drive-through, which is a separate use, that's considered a change of use. So that would be
Is an example to get at me?
yeah, that would be a major modification that would have to come back to city council for their approval if they wanted to change the site plan. Example 2, if there's a Michael's and you're a Kohl's and they wanted to change it to a Michael's, vice versa. Those are both retail establishments. That's not a change of use. If they wanted to make a change to the site plan, that would be done administratively. So did that kind of help distinguish between the two.
For those two examples, for sure. But what page did you say? I'd like to look at.
86.
Chapter
86. Okay.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, if I can, I think it's important to realize that we clearly define these different uses. So in our land use tables, we have, the residential land use table, the commercial, the employment. There are a series of uses that are listed down in the table. Every single one of those uses is defined in the code. And so what Rachel is saying is Kohl's doesn't come in and have its own definition, it's retail. And so if that gets changed to a Michael's, they don't have their own definition, they're retail. So they sit in that definition.
But there's a lot of things that encompass retail, from what I understand. But I haven't looked at the definitions, that's why I would like to. But a lot encompasses
Correct,
retail.
that's correct. And what this is saying is if that use doesn't change in the site plan, and there's a site plan modification, that would be an administrative change. It wouldn't go back if it wouldn't require a council approval.
I guess, to me, the example of a full service to a drive-through, there are other examples under retail that are retail uses that are completely different, that as a council member, when I approve it the first time, would not have done it had that use been a different retail use. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
And it's important for me to understand how they're defined.
That's fair. And what I would say is the retail to retail, if it changes the site plan, that again would come back because it's the site plan changing and the change of use. So that would go back to council if they had originally approved it.
Even retail to retail?
No.
No. Oh, sorry.
Only if the site plan changed. No.
It's an and, though. You have to have both.
It's an and, that's correct.
So I have a quick question. We've got a lot of words to review here, many pages. Do you guys do red lines? Because I'd love to see a red line of all this, so without having to read it word for word, I could go through and see. And if there is one, I apologize. I'm just asking a question. If there's a red line, it would be helpful. Number one point I'd like to make. I'd love to read that. That way you don't have to go word by word. And two, I think what Councilmember Goforth is saying is retail to retail. Well, a Kohl's versus an AutoZone. Yeah, they're both retail, but one is clothing and accessories. The other is car parts. Is that where you're going?
Yeah.
Okay, so I get that. I get that. And you could probably have 10,000 pages if we tried to drill down to every possible kind of a retailer. Bookstores, AutoZones, Home Depot, I get it. But a red line of all these text changes would be extremely helpful to me.
Sure. Yeah, Mayor, council members. So, and I see Councilmember Duff looking because there is a red line, but that is specifically for changes that were made between when we went to P&Z and they requested some modifications. So we wanted to show what those changes were from when it went to Planning and Zoning Board to City Council. But we do have all of the chapters, all the red lines on our website for the public to make it clear. So we can definitely upload those into Legistar. Yes, we could do that. Yes, and it's a lot because there's a lot of things moving. So anytime you see something moved, it's going to show as well.
Gotcha. I would love to be able to just review that easily and see, okay, this is changing, that's not.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mike.
Rachel, I had a question on, Mr. Adams brought up retail to retail, so Kohl's to AutoZone. Is that equal by retail, or is it change of retail?
Mayor, yes. So if it was strictly an AutoZone where they're just selling auto parts and they're not doing any sort of service on the car, that's retail to retail. But there's a difference between maybe a limited service automobile facility, like a Quick Lube. That's a change of use. That's not the same. So the AutoZone very specifically is retail, but other auto-related uses, 90% of the time are going to be a change of use.
Here's a scenario. Recently, I know the District 1 and I were contacted about a car wash going into a corner of a closed Walgreens. Walgreens had closed some of their corner, stores. And so they want to put in a car wash inside the Walgreens. And that was, Walgreens is considered what, a retail?
Retail.
But then we
car
have a
wash.
change of use to a car wash,
Yes.
and that would kick it back to us, correct?
If council originally approved that site plan and there was a condition of approval on an ordinance that said it has to comply with this site plan, yes.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'm just using the
Which
scenario.
most likely, as you know, most of the rezone and site plans that you see, they have that condition. It's very typical. We've done that for years.
Thank you.
I have
So-
a question. Oh,
Okay,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Do you want to go? Maybe this is too broad, but let's go back to the retail to retailer, service to service. The site plan is approved, the use is approved, but it falls within kind of two different spectrums of that use, like a hair salon versus a nail salon, right? What if we as the council member just are like, no, I don't think that's a good idea in my district. That doesn't bring in the type of crowd that I'm specifically looking for to build up my district. That's not what my people are looking for. So how do we work if the site plan is approved, if the use is approved, if everything looks good, but we just don't like the specific business that's going in, what's our course of action as a council member?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, limited, incredibly limited is the answer. Unless we have a development agreement that specifies that end user, then we don't have a means of changing that and or limiting that change in that space. And also go back to just two thoughts. One is realize this is intended to. This ordinance is intended to embody, as to this aspect, the current practice, the current application. It's not intended, this is how the city's operating right now. And second is it requires a site plan change. In other words, I'll oversimplify it, and Rachel can explain it for the footprint has to change, right? If the building is staying the same, if it's a Kohl's and it's turning into office and they're not changing the outside in any ways other than sort of TIs on the inside, well then if it doesn't trigger a site plan change, then you don't get to the second question, which is, did it change use? So you have to have the first part of the question, it has to be a yes before you get to the second question. So I just want to make sure, and that's the current practice, right? So, that's already been happening for many, many years.
Can we change that?
Property owner, what, in the state of Arizona? I don't know. Would
So-
be like lawsuits.
So, Mayor and Council Member, the way to affect more regulation is onto those sites is through a development agreement. So we would need to, but going backwards on already previously approved sites, no.
And Mayor, Council, I mean, to build off what Jim just said, because I don't know, Councilmember Taylor, if that would get to the example that you gave. If it were, certainly if we had approved a development because they were bringing a unique retailer and we wanted to ensure that we embody that through the development agreement. We think of some we've done recently and those we'll do in the future. And that's the way that we ensure that use or that particular retail use stays at the level that gave council comfort to approve it. But if it was an example, like you said, between a salon and, different kinds of salons or whatnot, I mean, the chances of us capturing that through a development agreement would mean that we would literally have to do a development agreement with each and every type of commercial center in the entire city. And I just don't know if that would be a practical expectation to have.
You still.
So it can't be district specific?
No, but
As far as doing all development agreements in just one district?
Yeah, like based on what your residents are looking for within that district, if that's what they would like to see, maybe there's a specific lifestyle within your district that you'd like to maintain and have businesses and services that reflect that.
But remember, the development agreement is only when it's first developed.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about an existing center.
Well, either or, really. I'm talking about both.
So-
Can you redevelop one? Can you choose a new one?
So Mayor and Council, to the extent that it would be a new development, that you see development agreements going to, or in cases where they're doing some other significant rezoning and they come in, and then the council has leverage to require a development agreement. What we found through the years is that the more restrictions you put in the development agreement, especially on end users, it sometimes kills the deal. In other words, even the original deal. And Councilmember Goforth is correct. Many times it's sort of what I'll call, it's sort of the turn, once it's what they have to open, right? Is it possible to do development agreements where it's not just at the moment of opening, but it continues throughout? It is possible, but then you're going to see a significant pushback from development, because now you've restricted their ability to market that in the future, and their ability to finance even at the beginning, because their finance is going to say, wait a second, I don't know how you're going to be able to meet all these future tenant restrictions. And so what we've seen as we've tried to push more restrictions in development agreements, that it affects their ability to finance the project in the beginning, and sometimes it's killed the deal due to the development agreement, and we've had to come back and do either amendments or the project just, on a couple cases, just never happened. So you have to balance this. It's not as simple as just saying, well, let's just do a lot of development agreements. You start to impact the ability of the developer to actually do the project.
Let's scoot over. Ms. Duff, did you have some comments?
And just commenting on the development agreements, the ways sometimes on shaping a development, a project, is sometimes we'll offer incentives in order to get what we want, but we cannot deny it based on, that's the way. We just don't use legislation to pick and choose our businesses. And we got to think, many times we approve site plans, especially on new developments, and it might identify one or two users that are anchor institutions on that, to make the deal go through. But there's many spaces that'll say retail or whatever like that, and they are kind of but they're not specifying which retail. They're just saying what kind of use is on that. So there's a lot of site plans that we go through that are not completely committed to all the users on that. And so it kind of like we have to go forward. And then once a center is identified in operation, it is normal to have turnover. And as long as the use isn't changing, they should be able to sign up a new tenant without having to go through a city process. So we're trying, the state's objective is to make things more streamlined and to be more business friendly and not have the burden of bureaucracy. And we're making some provisions, but we still, when there are major changes, we still have that same prerogative that we have now. So your asks are actually going more strict than we have in place right now, let alone what the state is requiring from us.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. It's the tenants that I'm thinking of, not necessarily the specified use.
All right. I know Mr. Adams is going to depart here soon, so
Good.
Rachel, carry on.
Okay, so the next broad topic is objective design standards. So staff has gone through our existing design standards to see where we need to make them objective. So if there was a should, changing to a shall, if we need to put an actual measurement to a development standard, doing that. Looking at adding additional objective standards, so we can no longer use our quality development design guidelines in reviewing and approving. So if there were any standards within those design guidelines that we want to codify, putting those within the zoning ordinance. So examples of what this means is, we've added a minimum requirement for the depth for what the required horizontal change in a wall. So before it specifically said that your wall has to be articulated every 50 feet. So what does that mean? You need to have now a 2-foot offset in that wall plane every 50 feet. Clarifying that just changing the color or texture of a material does not qualify as a separate building material. Adding diversity requirements for landscaping. So this is to make sure we don't have dead or dying disease spreading on a site. So having, if you have X number of trees, this percentage of them needs to be of 1 species, 2 species, so on. And then we've also, another example is added requirements for residential amenities based on the number of units. So really looking at to ensure our development is high quality, that what they're providing for amenities is in line with the scope of the development that they're proposing. So if we have 300 units, we're not just getting a dog park out of that. We're getting something substantial for the use and benefit of those residents. Yes, and I see that there might be a question.
So essentially, we have to think of every scenario right now.
That is why it is 150 pages, and it's all throughout the code.
Instead of, it actually provided more flexibility the other way, I think. I think they're shooting themselves in the foot, actually, not us, but I guess we have to do it, but.
Well, it does add some
Yeah, the
certainty.
state requires it.
Because there was some uncertainty before.
Yeah.
Get your mic.
Sorry.
I don't want to be heard.
Okay, be quiet.
So the question for you, though, is our landscape requirements, they're already in the code, correct?
They are.
But are there any landscape requirements in the design guidelines?
The design guidelines does cover things about landscaping, yes.
So now they're going to have to be codified in the objective standards in order to require them. Okay.
Correct.
So is this where I bring up trees or
think the
shade?
trade-
If you'd like.
Shade, more shade?
Yes, so there was, yes.
Okay.
So
The
other
trade-off
examples
is-
of large commercial developments, we've added in requirements regarding amenities and plazas and the shade within, in the parking lots. So there have been those sort of modifications as well.
So are we going to get to weigh in on this? Because I think, that, as we said, typically we weigh in each site plan. Now we have to weigh in now. So
So Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, what you weigh in on is when someone is asking to deviate from a requirement, or if there's an ordinance
I
where
mean
there's a
to
stipulation.
codify the objective standards.
That is what
This is
we're
your
doing. That's what
opportunity,
this
yes.
is. That's
They're
what we're
not in
doing
here.
now.
You're just giving us a couple examples. Like
For this presentation,
Yeah.
so today what we did was we really wanted to focus on kind of the key themes. We do have a full presentation that talks about some of the details of this.
Okay.
And they're also in that 150-page document because you don't want a 150-page presentation, I'm
No.
assuming. So what we've tried to do is today we really wanted to pick up the key themes. So that's the site plan modifications, the design standards, and Rachel's got a couple of other to go through. And then there's a presentation with the text amendments that are on the agenda for Monday, and then it's the text amendments. And so we will send you all a link to the red lines of the things that changed. And as Rachel said, the design guidelines and standards were in a lot of different places in the code, which is why this is such a massive undertaking and why there is such a large volume of pages to review. But this is the weigh-in on those objective standards.
is this on the agenda for Monday?
It is currently on the agenda, but I will discuss that later.
With these standards? Okay.
I believe that.
You're going to have more time, sneak peek to what Rachel's going to say. You're going to have more time, so don't worry.
We are working against the state requirement, though, which was the end of the last year. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next key topic here was the development plan review process. So we touched on this in the last presentation. What staff is proposing with the objective standards, which really affects kind of the authority of the design review board. We thought this was a great opportunity to streamline processes and to combine our site plan review and our design review process. So this really reduces redundancy for applicants. They're currently submitting same application submittal requirements in 2 places, getting review comments back on the same documents at different times. This really kind of aligns those. It's going to shorten the time frame by eliminating it needing to go to design review board and then P&Z and then city council. It's going to be clear for the public because there was often a lot of confusion from the public when they go to a design review board that they do not like the use, they don't like the site plan, but that's not the purview of that board. And we had to say, I'm sorry, you need to go to this other board to make those sort of comments to be heard. And this once again, make sure that we comply with state law. And as Mary was mentioning, there's also some other places where we wanted to improve clarity. So one of those has to do with the expiration and extension of our different land use entitlements. So currently, such as a council use permit, a site plan, a design review, they all have expiration timelines on them, but they weren't consistent. So despite you having to get your design review and your site plan, your design review would expire within a year, your site plan was good for 2 years. So we wanted to make sure those aligned across the board. So that was another change. Alternative compliance. So in the zoning ordinance, when we did the last really large amendment that established a lot of these objective design standards was when the city adopted the quality development design guidelines. At that time, we codified many of those standards, but we built in our alternative compliance process that provided some flexibility for applicants. So if they weren't able to meet the 3 materials, they could say, we want to propose this alternative with 2 materials, and we think it's equivalent or superior for these reasons. And if it met the qualifications, it would be, considered by the approving body. We found that hasn't been used how it was intended. People are using it just to deviate from standards. So we really wanted to look at those criteria and to tighten those up. Put more responsibility on the applicant for identifying what those changes actually are and why they think that they're required, why they're the minimum necessary, why they're equivalent or superior. So we really tried to work on those requirements. And then once again, with these process changes, it will now be required to go to Design Review Board for their recommendation before getting any sort of approval. So we think that's really going to strengthen that process and help really keep it to its intended purpose. And then as we were talking about the design standards, they're all throughout the code. So where we could, we tried to reorganize and consolidate them into, one place if we could, if it made sense. Really looked at the wording of the text to make sure they were clear. And then we finally went through and modified some definitions for clarity, and we added definitions that are used within the zoning ordinance but weren't defined. So with the public outreach on this process, we've started discussing this with the public in September. So in September, our Development Advisory Forum, we meet with them about every quarter and discuss with them these proposed text amendments that are coming forward. We've posted on our website in September the key concepts of what this was doing as well. We had an open house at the end of September, which we did not have great attendance for, unfortunately. So we only had 4 people attend. We had Councilmember Duff and 2 residents of Phoenix and 1 resident from Mesa, which was really unfortunate. And then we've had our newspaper ad, so that's pretty detailed, where we go through and we identify every section of the code that's going to be changed. When we had all of our revisions ready, what we did is we've heard from both our Planning and Zoning Board previously, and the public is, sometimes these get adopted as repeal and replace, and so you don't see all of the changes. So we've really been trying to make an effort to provide red lines. So we went through and converted it all to red lines to be able to post each individual chapter for the public to see. So that was done at the beginning of December. And then we went to P&Z December 8th, and then, or 9th, either 10th. Is one of those, I'm sorry. But we've been sending out email reminders about every 2 weeks to let people know they're on the website. There's a public comment feedback form. Please provide your comments. These are posted for review. And then went to the Planning and Zoning Board. So we've continued to send out those emails since the Planning and Zoning Board. And we have now just started getting some interest from the development community, unfortunately, and we've had a couple of requests for meetings, so we have been meeting with the community as quickly as we can. We just had a request come in on Monday, and we had a meeting yesterday with several of the land use attorneys that represent clients in Mesa. And unfortunately, despite them kind of hearing in general that this was happening and out there, they said they did not fully understand the comprehensiveness of the amendments that were before them. And they will be submitting letters requesting for this item to be continued to give them more time to digest and to respond to this. And so I think what staff is recommending is that we do wait on the introduction of this item and then introduce it on February 23rd. And that would give them 45 days to review and provide comment and work with staff. And we really want to make sure that we build in time there for us to meet with them and discuss comments before coming back and making a presentation on this. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Scott.
Mayor and council, there's a little bit of frustration, of course, that, wait till the last minute to do these are all very informed individuals who are going through the same exercise in basically every other city in the Valley and in Arizona, because all cities are having to comply with state law on that. That being said, what happened when the legislature did this, and it was collaborative, and Miranda can please come up and correct me if I'm misstating any of this, but the desire to streamline process across municipalities was something that was shared both by the legislature and the governor's office. And they encouraged the League of Cities and Towns to work collaboratively with the legislature, with the development community to set the framework in place of state law. Now, we don't like everything that was in there, but that's what compromise bills look like. If it was just a one-sided bill, we certainly would have drafted it differently, but this is compromise to meet the governor's and the legislature's desire to see a more uniform process and streamlined process across municipalities. So this is the work, and Rachel goes back to September as far as the notification. They've been working on this actually for years, right? I mean, literally a couple of years. Is that fair to say, Rachel, on this? So it's a tremendous undertaking, and staff has done a great job. Councilmember Duff's exactly right. Under state law, this was supposed to be adopted by the end of 2025. It's my understanding that maybe only one other large city has actually adopted theirs. Many of the other cities are just like us. They're going through this in order to, because it's such a large undertaking. But the spirit of the law, too, was that this was supposed to make things easier and more clear to the development community. And so because we're hearing questions from that very community, we feel a delay is warranted, because we would not want to pass something and then have them run to the legislature and say, well, everything that the city of Mesa just did actually confuses us more than what the initial process was. So that's why I think taking our time right now, getting this right, is more important than approving it just for the sake of approving it and having a flawed process. A bonus to that is, of course, I hear from Councilmember Goforth and certainly probably more of you that you'd like to dig in a little bit deeper to some of your questions about the content of this, and that will allow time for council to meet with staff and really kind of dig into some of those questions as well. So that's why staff is comfortable delaying this till February and giving that time for internal discussions and then stakeholder discussions to continue.
Chapter 86.
Chapter 86.
Thank you for that, Scott. I have been a very strong advocate for streamlining, as you all know. I've had many a conversation. In fact, we have a meeting today with a developer who's going to tell us how we can be better. So I think this is great, and I think the intention of the state legislature was great. And I've said what we should do is make sure that we have all the important aspects covered and required, and then everything else should be flexible and easy. We don't want to over-regulate. We don't want to make it super complicated. But so when we determine, okay, these are going to be the required objective, I think to me, that's based on the values of the community. So to me, that has to come from the council, you know, what those, because you didn't just codify the entire design standard guidelines, right? You picked the ones you thought were most important. Well, that's important for us to weigh in on, in my opinion, because that really comes from the community, what we value and what the community values through us. So that's why I would like to see those. I'd like to, because like I said, it's not the whole thing. We've picked and chosen some. And so I hope that the rest of the council would like to weigh in on that too. I think that's important for us to decide the must-haves and then let everything else be really easy and streamlined to work with. And I trust your judgment. I'm sure you got it right, but it's our job to make sure that we do that. So those are my comments.
Mr. Redia?
I think I'll just add a different point as we make these changes. I think we see not a big issue with these larger developments that can hire attorneys and staff to facilitate the process that we're doing. But for small businesses, especially navigating through my favorite software system of Dimes, that we look at Nana over there. But I think if we can keep on having a robust kind of program for small businesses, a technical assistance program for them to help identify these changes and help throughout these changes, because I feel we leave small businesses a bit behind when we do these changes, and it's very costly for them to hire attorneys, or it becomes as I mentioned in the past, it becomes then like I'm not going to improve my office to add a couple conference rooms and a suite for an office. So I just we look at those as we look at these changes internally as a staff, that we look at ways to keep on supporting with technical assistance small businesses that don't have the means to hire like these large developers that can do this and facilitates this work. So just a comment there.
I think one comment that I get consistently from developers and architects is, tell me what you want from the get-go. Tell me what you want. Tell me what I need to hit. What is the standard? What are we going for? Instead of staff, and then a board, and then planning and zoning, and then council, because every time that it becomes arbitrary or too open, it's causing delays and costs, and that's when we get into 18 months on sometimes getting things passed, which adds to the expense of the project. So I understand wanting to have input on it, but I do understand of developers saying, I need to know what to hit and try to get it right the first time, because I can't go through the cost and time delays because there's money, sitting and paying interest while we go through 18 months of satisfying everybody. So, hopefully we can get that tightened up so it makes it easier for development, reduces the cost of development, which includes housing, of course, and leaves less to an arbitrary, just which way the wind is blowing, what people want, including our council, right? We have to know what our standards are, what the ordinance is, and, direct from there within it at a tighter window, because right now that window's way too big as far as the developer community or anybody who's trying to create changes. It's just adds to the complexity of our staff having to meet with people again and again and again and trying to get them closer. But then that's going to change in the next board, and that's going to change in the next board, and that's going to change when it gets to council. So I can understand the benefit of it, and I understand wanting to weigh in, but I think the current standards is just too wide, and we're too bureaucratic, and we add to the cost and timeline.
Jen, I mean weigh in now before it gets adopted, and then we're done.
Yeah, but I'm saying.
Oh, you mean even now?
to weigh in?
No, I'm talking about where we are now
Oh,
and
yeah,
why this is
yes.
necessary
Yeah.
in order that we can tighten it up for a number of reasons.
I want, actually, Jen made me think of something, thank you. What happens to those who are in the middle of contract or development right now as we are going through these changes that are required by the state? Are they going to be grandfathered into the prior requirements so they don't have, actually, based on what she was saying, they don't have to jump through a million hoops to catch up to the new state standards?
Yeah, so Mayor, council members, with all of our text amendments, if we have applications that are in the works, we give them a choice. We say, technically, you have to adhere to the standards that were in place at the time when you applied. If you wanted to use the new standards, you're welcome to.
Okay.
So it gives them, if there's some sort of benefit that they might receive out of the text amendments, they can use them.
Okay, so if it's easier for them to follow what was prior, they can continue in that vein, but if there's something better for them in the new standards that we come up with, they can switch tracks, if you will. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll just add, welcome back, council, from break.
Thank you.
With that said, when we reach out to the communities and get input, sometimes these deadlines are great as far as I'm concerned. I don't like extending them just based on a few individuals' comments, regardless who they are. What I want to really hear from is our residents, people in our community that work every day, and I know there's I'll use the word zoning attorneys that are outside the city that advocate for businesses in Mesa. However, in looking back, are there ways that we could reach more people better? And I don't know if do we go where they are? When you have a workshop, do you have a workshop? Do we have it at a library? Do we have it at different places in the community like we've done on our financial side to get input ahead of time so we can just get these things off our plate, extend another, what we're talking 30 days or so into February.
Yeah, roughly 45-ish days towards February and, sorry.
Well, we're used to doing that, but it's at the same point in the beginning, how can we reach more people, more individuals faster than, and getting input cleaner to help streamline our processes?
Yeah, Mayor, council members, I think the public outreach is the hardest part of, it's really getting participation in these, and the approach varies depending on the text amendment or if it's a plan. So, for example, with plan efforts, we often go out to the community for those meetings, whereas a text amendment, we might specifically target certain stakeholders, like an industry, if we know it's really going to affect them. With the open house for this one, we tried to make it virtual so that it was easy for people to attend. We use all of our standard methods, social media, try to get it out there, our email lists. It's just a challenge of getting people interested in participating, unfortunately.
Do we use Channel 11? I'm just thinking about that.
We could look at that further, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Mayor, Rachel's also being nice, so I can be more blunt about it. We're a little more frustrated with this, or I am frustrated with this particular group because they knew and they had received outreach dating back months, and so but I'm biting my frustration right now. Maybe I'm airing it, publicly, but because at the end of the day, we want the product to be right, and I think that is the most important part. And so, even if it was at the 11th hour, that for groups that were notified starting back in September that this was coming and waited until now to weigh in. The importance is, though, that community, they are individuals that will be greatly impacted by this, and so we do need to work with them to ensure that we do this. And so that's why I think it's a reasonable delay. And I also believe, Mayor, for the reasons Councilmember Goforth mentioned, that it is important. What I'm hearing from council is they love the idea of more of making the process more easier to navigate and consistent for developers. But you're right, the trade-off to that is you got to get it right on the front end. And so if there's questions that we need to answer or clarity that needs to be provided to some of those standards, I think now is the time to do it before it's adopted. So because of that, then I think this delay can serve both purposes.
Well, I think we've received some emails in opposition to this text amendment, and I don't want that to really drive us to delay our votes. You know, just because you have opposition, you've had time to weigh in, and now you're weighing in at the last hour, asking us to extend time to give you a chance to weigh in. So I know we've had that comment or talk about it, but in order to streamline the conversation for these text amendments is important. What I wonder, did you, Rachel, go through every page in there and look at it, or did you use AI?
Unfortunately, it's a very tedious effort, yeah.
Okay.
I would have used AI.
Well, using technology to our advantage, help identify areas of the code that need to change, then we put the human touch to it. That's where I was at. Okay, council, anything else? Okay, item 3 is to take action on appointments to various boards and committees. Is there a motion to approve that? Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Thank you, Ms. Goforth. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Item 4 is to acknowledge receipt of board minutes. Is there a motion for that? Thank you, Ms. Goforth. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council members, do you have anything you wish to share?
I'd like to share about our New Year's Eve in downtown Mesa on December 31st at noon. And thank you for attending, Mayor and Councilmember Goforth and Vice Mayor Summers. We're there also to help celebrate bringing in the new year. At noon, we had a countdown, and the diving lady, suspended gymnastic, came back and down and dove in to the ground. And then we celebrated the new year with a toast of apple cider. There's a lot of activities for the kids to do. There's a great band, Chucky Baby and All Stars, to celebrate. Atala Torque Productions, I want to thank them for providing the diving lady again, and Firework Productions for the pyrotechnics that we had at noon. And of course, a big thank you to DMA, Downtown Mesa Association, for putting together this second annual event. It was well attended and so much fun.
I think the band was incredible.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were
there is a great band. And I think, according to Jimmy, that was one of the most well-attended New Year's, and we can expand on that. So thank you, Jeff, and your team, and DMA. That's awesome. Anything else, Council? Let's go for it.
Yeah, I'd like to mention, I went to a groundbreaking at Falcon Field for the Civil Air Patrol. They are an auxiliary to the United States Air Force and do a lot of great work out of that. We are lucky to have a Falcon composite squadron there at Falcon Field, and they do education for young cadets, and they provide emergency services. So they are expanding their footprint there at Falcon, and so that's exciting for them, and I was honored to be a part of that.
All right, great. Ms. Taylor, you have something?
Yes, I actually spent a lot of time with Mesa PD on our break, and I had a really good time learning about the incredible efficiencies that we have. Our city's police department is amazing. So I toured the Real-Time Crime Center. I felt like I was walking into a movie scene. It was just, I mean, it was awesome. The way they showed me multiple examples of how our police department has been able to mitigate future potential crimes committed because we use our cameras so seamlessly, number one, and wisely at the Real-Time Crime Center. And then I also did a ride-along and a fly-along with our aviation crew. And in both of those instances, I had the opportunity to see how they triangulate. The police department uses the Real-Time Crime Center while the pilots are flying, while the ground patrol is working, and how they work as a unit, an organism. And I just thought, this is really amazing, and that Mesa is so privileged that we have had police officers, chiefs of various police departments come from all over the United States to witness our ingenuity and our ingenious behavior as a city and looking at how we can best utilize various traffic cameras and business cameras to help fight crime before it gets worse. I mean, I saw a shooting happen. It was very sad, but we found the gun thrown into the canal. We were able to find the man who was fleeing the scene. He could have gone off and done even more terrible things to other people, but because we used the Real-Time Crime Center, that was mitigated, amongst many other things. So that was just incredible. And then I toured the new public facility off of, the public safety facility off of Power. And I got to see how our police department and our firefighting department work together in that same facility. And that, that's very special. I didn't know this initially, but now that I'm on the council, I've had my eyes open to a few different things, and that Mesa is very special in that we have a police department and a firefighting department that work very cohesively together. And that does not always happen in every city, in every municipality. Sometimes there's a little bit of a turf war between those two departments. And we should be so thankful that we are so privileged that those two departments are such teams that are willing to go to bat together to keep us safe and to protect us. And just to be clear, that fire chief told me that every single day there is a fire in Mesa that they have to go address every single day. Most people, I don't think, know that. And they're very real. This is not like, oh, my phone caught fire and that was it. This is house fires and building fires and car fires. So I just got to have a really good eye-opening experience. I'm very grateful for our departments and how much they work together and how safe we are. We're a very fortunate city. So that was my busyness, among some other little meetings. But.
Good. Well, I rode along with Assistant Chief Walker for New Year's Eve on firework patrol, and I can tell you it's out of control. So as hard as our officers and everybody tries so hard to mitigate fireworks in our community, I was kind of blown away, but especially at midnight and looking across the city. And I asked Mr. Butler, maybe we should get a little bit of Real-Time Crime Center footage and just show. It was better than being at a fireworks show, actually, in our city. So,
well, we would welcome our state legislature to intervene on that issue. They're interested in a lot of things, so fireworks would be a great thing for them to be more proactive in helping us regulate.
Would they take local control from us? They can do that,
Yeah.
really.
They have taken local control from us, yes.
Okay, with that, Mr. Butler, you want to share our future meetings?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll, of course, be here on Monday for our scheduled council meeting. Just to note, and your staffs are aware of this, in March, we're going to be switching the dates of the council meetings so that there's not a conflict with the National League of Cities meeting in D.C. So just be aware that that's being changed on your calendars. And then, of course, we'll be back here next Thursday, the 15th, for study session at 7:30 that morning.
Okay,
Great.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Ms. Goforth, all in favor, say aye. 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 We're adjourned.